Everyone, I am back. I've been working on this video, um, kind of taking my time because I do have things going on, in real life. So it took me a minute to finish this presentation that I wanted to do, but I wanted to do a review on the show Them. Okay, so it covers terror in America. And I'm going to issue a trigger warning for everyone out there. Some content of this video is disturbing, and therefore it may be triggering for some people because that is the nature of the show. So I'm just letting you all know before I begin. Okay, so Them is a series on Amazon Prime which aired on April 9th of this year. And the series is set in the 1950s and is centered around a black family that moves from North Carolina to an all-white neighborhood in Los Angeles, in Compton. And they are not only harassed by the neighborhood whites, if you want to call them that, but they're also dealing with these very like malevolent spirits in that area. So, and this picture is one of the main characters. Her name is Lucky. She is a mother of three, and she is the wife of Henry Emery. So, in the first episode, we see an old Caucasian woman standing outside of Lucky's home in the South, okay, in North Carolina. And she's talking to Lucky, and she's like, she actually hears Lucky's newborn baby crying because Lucky has the front door open. And I can't remember why she stepped outside, but the Caucasian woman, then asks if she can have or see the son of, Lucky's son. And so Lucky tells her that she better leave. Well, we don't know at that point what exactly happens until later on in the series. And so, you know, what ends up happening is two Caucasian men show up, alongside the old Caucasian woman. And they break into Lucky and her husband's house. And because Lucky runs back in and she shuts the door. So they end up breaking in, and one of the men rapes Lucky, and the old Caucasian woman kills Lucky's newborn son, while the other Caucasian man is basically looking out to make sure that no one comes and sees what's going on. So I wanted to emphasize that to this day, sexual trauma follows women of color, black, indigenous women of color, and these are acts that were and still are, a huge part of the settler colonialism. And it's not only carried out by Caucasian men. Today, it's carried out by men within, even within black, indigenous communities, communities of people of color. Okay, so that trauma is passed down for generations and generations. And in this show, we see the psychological effects that this has on Lucky and how it almost completely like broke her spirit and drove her nuts, drove her crazy. And that's what people keep calling her all throughout the show. People are calling her crazy, but this is mainly because she refuses to allow Caucasian people in the suburban neighborhood that she moved um, to treat her and her children any kind of way. So she goes at the Caucasian boy who pisses on her sheets. She slaps the Caucasian woman who calls her a nigger. So she's really being called crazy for giving back to them what they dish out, which is that's a natural reaction to defend yourself and, when somebody's trying to attack you, so, but we also see some of the results of what happens when people are sexually abused because, outside of the racism that they're experiencing in the show, there's also this psychological torment that she's going through. And due to her not being understood and secretly keeping, she secretly keeps the body of her newborn child in a box. Her husband later finds that out and he fails to understand what happened. But it wasn't really, how do I say this? He thinks she's crazy because she's keeping the box, and because she's keeping the box, he takes it that she is the one who killed her son. He starts to believe that, so this causes her to be placed in a mental asylum when he finds this box. So even though he knew his wife was raped, he still chose to place her in a mental asylum. So this also shows the extent of his selfishness and unwillingness to understand his wife and all that she had been through as well. Okay, so pictured here are the Caucasian women that live in the suburban neighborhood in um, Compton when the black family, Lucky and her family, moves in. So, the whole time, these Caucasian people have their own issues, right? Yet they all somehow found time to harass the Negro family. And it's just projection. It's projection. They're projecting a lot of their own shit onto, this black Negro family. So, they're all suspicious of the Negro family when they moved in. And I've even noticed this in real life to this day. Like it's a psychological projection that's occurring to where a person denies their own feelings and impulses and displaces them onto another person, animal, or thing. And so I've seen this done a lot by people of, European people of European descent. And, I grew up in suburban community where I was the so-called minority, right? And there was also that same energy, like you could tell that they're uncomfortable around you. And, they make slick comments at you. And that's exactly what they did in the show. So this main character right here, Elizabeth, you know, she's leading this campaign to get the Negroes out of their neighborhood, right? Um, she was actually molested by her father, or maybe he's her stepfather. I don't really know, but either way, he's still in the position of a father. So she was molested by him since she was a child, and her mom hated her because of it. So she had all this going on, and she projected that anger and disgust that she had towards her father and that situation onto this Negro family. So she was a perfect example of this psychological projection that oftentimes, um, Caucasian people engage in. She was a perfect example of that. Okay, so Henry Emery. So this is Henry. Henry. This is Lucky's husband. So he gets this job working as, I think, some type of engineer at this like corporate company, right? So he's having to conform and submit in the workplace. He's feeling like he's having to feel like he has to minimize himself so not to offend the Caucasian employees with his blackness. And so not to lose his job. And so that was Henry Emery's struggle. And, at his job, his boss speaks to him in a very um, condescending manner, not being able to um, talk back, or, yeah, not being able to talk back due to fear of losing his job. And so this is something that he's, dealing with as a man, and it begins to mess with his mind because it's messing with his masculinity now. Because let's say, okay, let's take all the racism and this and that out of it. Let's say you're just completely out in nature, right? And a male of another species attacks you. It is, or even another family, it's in the male's nature to defend himself, to defend his family. And so that is what he's going to do. And, you know, but in this artificial European constructed system, men of color tolerate the abuse a lot of times from European men in attempts to avoid being jailed or killed or losing their job. So they suppress their masculinity. And that's what we see happening here with Henry throughout the entire series, and it begins to drive him crazy. So, wealth and mental illness. Wealth can only get a colored person so far. What it can't buy is freedom to forget who you are. And that's what Mrs. Beaumont said. Mrs. Beaumont was another colored person whose family moved into Compton. I believe it was East Compton in particular. And Lucky, okay, so Henry Emery's wife, she went to speak with Mrs. Beaumont after Henry's cousin informed her of what happened to Mrs. Beaumont after she moved into Compton. And so the condition she was living in, by being the only person of color in the neighborhood and being of mixed race, she pretty much lost her mind and she was placed in a mental asylum. Um, Now, I'm not going to go into everything that she did to lose her mind, but I do want to stress that, many women of color, people of color in general, indigenous peoples especially, were placed in insane asylums. American Indians were placed in asylums for refusing to assimilate into European culture and society, for continuing to speak their language, you know, for rebelling. So even in today's society, the way people of color are treated is enough to make one go insane, only because if someone rebels, as you naturally should, these beings, okay, will find a way somehow, okay. And if you're not educated enough to get around that, you could be jailed or killed. So again, we see that one's natural instinct is being suppressed. So what Mrs. Emery did is she turned that anger in on her family, which is something that a lot of black families, a lot of families of color do. So that's what she did, and that's what placed her in that asylum. Okay, so there's a scene where there's this malevolent spirit that poses as Henry's cousin. And the spirit says, they want to poison our beautiful black babies in this world. They want to kill our sons, but we won't let them. And they want to make us destroy ourselves, Lucky, but we won't let them. Not our babies, not ourselves. We won't let them. We are the mothers. It is the time for the mothers to do the work of our Father, Lucky. We will do the work. Our children must go when we decide, not them. So, you know, a perfect example of this is Lucky attempted to kill her daughter after speaking with this spirit, pictured right here. Um, I believe this is Paula, played by Paula J. Parker, I believe is her name. But she thinks that's really the cousin when it's a spirit posing as Henry's cousin. So she attempts to kill her daughter after speaking with that spirit, you know, and that's what the spirit told her. And so that's why she attempted to do it, because she's thinking, okay, I'm going to take my children's life. Like, I'm not going to allow a white person to do it, right? She listens to what that malevolent spirit is telling her. And it also takes me back to the movie Beloved, where Oprah Winfrey's character, she um, kills, I believe it's her newborn baby, and I think that's the spirit that comes back that is beloved, is the baby that she killed when she thought that white people were going to come and take that baby and sell that baby off, which I guess they were planning to do until they saw that she had took the life of her baby herself. So this scene reminds me of that. Maybe that's kind of where they got the inspiration for that idea. So yeah, obviously, let me go back to this. Obviously, you want for your children to live the best life, right? So, but this is a malevolent spirit again. That's a lower entity that is telling her, don't let them take your child's life. You take your child's life, right? So, again, it's putting that death, that idea of death, that energy into her realm. So this is what these people are. They stand for death. They exemplify death. And you see it in just the behaviors, the foods, the ways of thinking, So that's what's going on here. Now, the tap dance man. Um, he said, "A black man's heaven is a white man's what?" And he is basically like a blackface minstrel show character who follows Henry, the husband and father, around. So he plays on Henry's insecurities and he tells him to fight back in a taunting manner. Now, fighting back isn't wrong, but knowing that the father has no army to back him up, nobody to back him up, the tap dance man is basically pushing Henry to an early death. You can't go to war alone. And so one thing he did show Henry was that which, and I thought this was a good thing. He showed Henry that it was Henry's own desire to do what he wanted to do, his own selfishness, that led to the suffering of him and his family. He left his wife to go to the movies. That's when his wife got raped, his son got killed. And he also didn't tell his wife about the non-Negro clause that was in the deed for the house that he bought. I mean, his wife found out once they got there, you know. And so his family was being tortured not only by Caucasian people, but also by these malevolent spirits of these colonial settlers. And so that's something that the tap dance man did show him. Like, it was your decisions that led to this. It was your desires to do XYZ that led to your family being in this position. Now, um, another one of those spirits poses as a schoolmate of Ruby's. So this is Ruby, this is the spirit. So Ruby says, I don't want to be like them anymore. I don't want to be ugly. I want to be beautiful, Doris, like you. So Doris is the name of that spirit that she was talking to that posed as a schoolmate. So that's what Ruby says to Doris. And shortly after, she looks into a mirror, like a cosmetic handheld mirror, and she sees herself with blue eyes. Um, she then closes the case only to see that, only to find that Doris has disappeared. And there's this white paint in the closet that she sees. Well, she dips her hand in the white paint and she looks at it in amazement, like, this is how I would look if I was white. And she walks out to the game that's happening outside with her entire body covered in white paint. So the students at the game all stop and look at her while she cheers, completely covered in white paint. So Ruby believes that Doris is a schoolmate, but Doris is in fact a malevolent spirit posing as a student, which follows Ruby around and tells her that she's pretty for a colored girl. So fills her mind with these insecurities and about her skin and about her family. And I don't want to be like them. I want to be as close to whiteness as possible because whiteness is purity. That's basically the idea that this entity gives Ruby. And Doris knows that Ruby doesn't fit in because she's the only colored girl at the school. And so that's what she wants. She wants to look like the other girls. She wants to fit in with the other girls. And so that spirit plays on those insecurities and messes with Ruby's psyche throughout the entire show. The Man in the Hat. So this is when it really gets wicked. So the Man in the Hat was a European settler, Dutch, I believe. He was a prophet of his community, and he was mocked by those of his community, but they still believed in him to a degree. But it is his spirit that haunts the colored women who move into the all-white neighborhood. He gets into their mind, into their spirit, and he gets them to carry out these wicked acts. And he's all the Lord this, the Lord that. That's how that was him speaking through. It was him speaking through Henry's cousin to Lucky. It was him. It was him speaking to Mrs. Beaumont because she told Lucky that she saw the Man in the Hat. So, yes. There's also another spirit that speaks to the youngest daughter, but I didn't cover that in this video. So, it wasn't really too much that was going on there. So, anyway, so there's in this episode about the Man in the Hat, they show the history of this settler community. So there's a Negro couple that comes into this European settler community of Dutch people. And this is the couple that was passing by on their way to San Francisco. So there was an issue with their wagon, and when they saw the priest, the husband, the man, he asked if he and his wife could stay for a night. And so the priest said yes, and that's his wife right here. So the priest said that the men of the village would try to fix it. So the man and his wife stayed in the village during that time. But the people of the community looked down on the prophet for accepting Negroes into his community. And so they mocked him and they mocked his faith in God because of it. So, although initially the prophet, the man in the hat, accepted the couple into the community because he thought, this is what God would want him to do, things began to take a turn for the worst. So, in this scene, this is the image on the left of the woman who came into the community with her husband. She was pregnant. Um, she's in a room with European women sewing. So they ask her where she's from. And she says that she doesn't know and that all she knows is the English language. She said, so I guess I'm American. And the European women laugh and they begin making rude comments. They compare, they're like, well, how do you all give birth? Do they give birth like animals? Do their children just get up and start walking immediately after? You know, and so it's meant to be a dig at her, obviously, although they acknowledge the fact that, these melanated, Negro babies are naturally more advanced, So what I really wanted to put emphasis on is the fact that she was like, oh, well, my family speaks English, so I guess we're American. So she says that. And the thing is, she's colonized. So yeah, your family um speaks English, right? She's like, I don't know where we're from. I guess we're just from America. Well, if you're from of African descent, you're gonna know where you're from. Everybody that I know of that's of African descent knows where they're from. It's only the people who are of indigenous descent that have been reclassified throughout the years through these colonial racial, constructs that have forgotten who they are. And so, um, this woman, she's indigenous. She's from the Americas. Um, and so, there's no question about it. And that's just something I really wanted to point out in the show. Now, the image on the right, it depicts a scene in which they ask the Negro man, the black man, what they should do to reach water because they were unable to reach water after digging so deeply into the ground for so long. So he helped them with that, and he was actually able to successfully reach water. And what I wanted to point out here is the fact that him being able to do that and them being like, oh, well, let's ask him, shows that he is truly an indigenous man of that land. Indigenous people tend to know their land. Even if the knowledge is lost over the years, DNA memory brings it back. So they asked him for a reason. He's not a damn African. And what I've noticed in the show is they used that the word African as a slur to them once, they pretty much started to let it be known that they were suspicious of them and didn't trust them because they had brown skin. At that point, then they started to call them Africans. It was a slur. And the prophet, especially, he used the term. So basically, after the European settlers were helped, they were not grateful for the help that they received. And instead, they accused the man of black magic, of partaking in black magic. Now, this is interesting to me. I'm going to share a little bit. I used to work with a woman who she lived in a very rural area in the South, and her family had land, and they had, I don't know what type of water source was in the land, but it was some water on the land. And she said people in her community had been, the white people, okay, had been trying to get access to that land, take over that land. She said that when her grandfather was growing up, they called her grandfather a water witch because he had the ability to find water. So it's this same type of thing that goes on to where they demonize indigenous people. And she knew she was indigenous. She told me, she was like, yeah, my grandma's native. She was like, yeah. Um, but it's this thing again where European settlers, colonists, demonize indigenous people, people of color, whatever they want to call you, they demonize you because of your connection to the land. Um, Ignorant of the fact that we are as much connected to the land as the natural trees, as the birds, as the ants. You know what I mean? We are just as much a part of the land as they are. And, they don't get that, though. They don't understand that. So, now, the man in the hat, he already had issues with his vision when this episode opens up. So then he begins to see the Negro couple as these like evil type of alien beings. And he goes into prayer and he comes to the conclusion that they are evil. So he blames them for his loss of vision. And he also oversaw and led in the torture of this couple, of this Negro couple. So when they began torturing the couple, he read this Bible verse that he claimed was justification for the torture of the quote unquote African race. That's what he called them. And he used the Bible to try and curse the couple. But before the couple was killed, it was the Negro woman, okay, this indigenous woman, and she began to speak curses on them. She was like, curse all of you for, doing this to us. We were kind to you. You claimed that you, would help us, yada, 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 yada. So these, wicked ass European settlers, they set these people on fire, which led to the building being burned. And so when this happened, the boy whom the man in the hat assumed was his son led him underneath the building. And it was underneath that building where these wicked entities told him how to deal with the Negro people. So this is what they said. You see how it happens with them. Everything they touch, they destroy. You must destroy them first. You walk through the door and break their hearts from the inside. With their broken souls shall you purchase endless life, and such a power men have only in dreams. But if you shall fail to break them, your own soul shall be forfeit. If you fail to break them suffering, if you fail to bring them suffering, you will suffer. If you fail to make a hell for them, one should be made for you. And that was the pact that the Christian prophet made with those entities before that burning building totally collapsed on him. So those entities are telling him this. And I wanted to also say this. This is why they kill people of color, black people, indigenous people. This is why they kill you. This is what they think. This is literally what they think. So, what you don't understand is you are their sacrifices. And they believe, again, that they will have endless life and such a power as men only have in dreams if they torture people of color. So that is what was shown in this show, and that's what still happens to this day. So, my conclusion is that the show had brilliant writers. The way the writers and directors weave the behavior of melanated people to the terrorism that melanated people face in the Americas was genius to me. Um, Another conclusion I have was that the soil carries the energy of what has occurred on the soil. So that land has that energy. If the land has not been cleansed of the things which desecrate the land, okay, war, rape, murder, everything like that, then the land will continue to carry the energy of those things just as it does in the show. And, I would say that's why America's suffering like it is. That's why we continue to see these killings. That's why America has the highest rate uh, of sick people in the world. Okay? So, the food, a lot of the food is fake. It's drugs. It's drugs masquerading as food. That's a book I read in college. That's what it is. So this is why we see this stuff happening here. You can't kill off people, especially people who belong to this land, and think that you're going to live peacefully on this land. It's not going to happen. So, yeah. I also wanted to say that the insanity that was depicted in the show is totally real. It showed a small glimpse of the spiritual aspect of this terrorism that occurs in America. The insanity has begun to infect so many people, including the so-called Negro or Black people, people of color. You know, there's so many people with these horrific childhood stories. There's so much trauma that goes unaddressed and unresolved. And it's, you know, it's this, so this was very accurate what it showed in this show. And regarding the end of the show, you know, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what, you know, you'd want to see in a show. You always want a happy ending, but it was realistic because the end was no end. And that's the reality of what it's like to be a melanated, brown skinned person in America. As long as there are European people on this continent, these problems are going to persist. You know, at least until melanin dominant people choose to rise up collectively. So as of right now, that hasn't happened, and therefore there's no end to the trauma. So the end of the show, when they walked out and they still had to face the cops, hey, that's what the fuck's going on today. You know what I mean? You're still having to face this European colonial system, and I wish people would call it what it is. It's a colonial system. Colonialism hasn't ended because the people who brought the colonial system over here are not gone. So, you know, you're still facing that, you know. And regarding everyone's reactions to the show, no, it was definitely, I definitely had to fast forward through certain scenes. I'm not even gonna lie. The rape scene, I didn't watch it. Where they killed the baby, I didn't watch it. I had to fast forward through it. But I think that everyone's reaction to the show was justified. People were angry, people were upset. And, you know, it's because of the traumatic events that were depicted in the show. But this occurs in real life. So people should be angry about what occurs in America in real life and should do something to change it. And that's basically all I have to say about this show. It was really good. I think, you know, if you're into that type of thing, definitely check it out. If you like horror and all that type of stuff, definitely check it out. And yeah, so I hope you guys liked my depiction, or not depiction, but my review, and just how I drew those conclusions of the fact that these were people of the land that they were doing this to. These are, you know, indigenous people. And this is realistic. This is something that still continues to happen. And has not been an end to it yet. So like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on the show if you've seen it. Um, I know I did this review like hella late, but like I said, I wanted to do it earlier, but I was just so busy. I've been so busy. Um, but anyway, check out my shop, Attic Indigo. Get my book, Prayers, Musings, and Poetry. And check out my shoe line, Kaona. And those links are in the description box. And have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.